Entrepreneurs are notorious for chasing shiny objects, for following the woman in the red dress. We are typically people who have a very short attention span, especially when new possibilities come our way. But how do you know if that new opportunity is the right one to follow or not? How do you know if it's going to lead you to your destiny and your dreams, or if it's just going to be a distraction from what you really should be focused on? That is the million-dollar question, literally in some cases. And in this episode, we want to talk about how you can assess the opportunity that's in front of you to know if it's one that you should jump on or you should just let roll on by. Welcome to the Shift Podcast. I'm Matt Ware with my co-host, Evan Weiland. We are at the Uva Wine Bar in Colorado Springs. And Evan, I'm excited to talk about this idea of opportunity because we're facing this every day.
Yeah. I mean, entrepreneurs are idea-driven, but we do know that not all ideas deserve attention, right?
Right. Not all of our ideas are good ideas, right?
Yeah. The most successful business owners that I've seen so far, they know how to filter distractions. They know how to filter, okay, is this something I should pursue? And we're going to get into that. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. Now, there's another episode that we did called Persevere or Pivot. Mm-hmm. And in that episode, we talked about, the idea that sometimes when we face difficulty on the entrepreneurial journey, we're tempted to pivot because what we're doing is hard. We're beating our head against the wall. We can't seem to see a way through. And that's a little bit different context than what we're talking about in this episode. Right. That one was dealing with what do you do when you feel like it's not working and life is too hard. This has more to do with when there's a new opportunity that presents itself, when there's something new that you might be able to pursue or to tack on to your business or whatever. How do you know how to evaluate that? So a slightly different nuance to maybe what you deal with some of these possibilities. And by the way, the more successful you are, the more opportunities you're going to have. And sometimes people get this backwards. They think if I get more opportunities, I'll become more successful. It actually doesn't work that way. Right. The way it works is as you begin to build success, more opportunities seem to find you. And I don't know why. I'm sure there's some law of the universe, attraction or whatever that makes that the case. But what we know is the more successful you get, the more opportunities come your way because doors just open for you and people come to you and they pitch you things and all these things. And so if you're successful, just expect you're going to have more opportunities. And something else to keep in mind, and this may hurt a little bit, is that the less successful you are, the more tempted you'll be to take every opportunity that comes your way. Because you think, this is the one, right? This is the one that'll change everything. This is the one that'll get me to the next level. And so that's why it's so important, what we're talking about in this episode, to know how to accurately assess these opportunities. I think part of what shaped my view around some of this is Alex Hormozi's thoughts about it. And, I know he's controversial and there's things I like about him and things I don't like about him. But I think his insight on opportunity is really good. He says that the opportunity of a lifetime, right? And we're always pitched with that, like, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. He says the opportunity of a lifetime comes along about every 6 months. And I think that's a way of saying, just what I was saying, if you're successful, you're going to get more opportunities. This one is probably not the one that is going to make or break everything in your life for the rest of your life, right? And so I think it's important to have that healthy skepticism, maybe even healthy cynicism, to not believe everything, or at least not take it always at face value. Just like you, if you're a business owner, you're always selling, you're always being sold.
Sure.
And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I think that's just the world that we live in. And so if you tend to be gullible, if you tend to kind of buy into the get rich quick type of thing, if you have a silver bullet mentality, if you think, this one thing is going to be the thing that changes everything, you can fall for a lot of so-called opportunities, only to find out that was a massive waste of time and energy and money and all of that. And people go bankrupt chasing opportunity.
That's right. Yeah. When you think entrepreneur, you think of a person who chases opportunity, right?
Right.
But if you're going to chase opportunity, then isn't it just as equally as important to know how to evaluate if it's an opportunity, right? And so you need to know, is it an opportunity category or does it go into the distraction category?
Right.
And if you don't have a compass for knowing how to evaluate these things, then you're just going to be a victim to all the stuff that you just mentioned.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's why we have to develop a sense of discernment around these things to know, like, is this opportunity, is this part of my destiny? Is this the dream? Or is this just a distraction?
Just a distraction.
Right. And so I want to maybe give a little bit of context and run the risk of even contradicting myself in doing so. But I think it's just important to paint this picture.
Okay.
Right. Like on the one hand, you have the Alex Hormozi mindset that says the opportunity of a lifetime comes along every 6 months. Right. You miss this one, there's another one coming.
Right.
Okay. On the other hand, Stephen Furtick, who I love some of the things he has to say about this as well, he says that you have to seize the opportunity of a lifetime during the lifetime of the opportunity. In other words, every opportunity has a window. And if you miss that window, that could be closed forever. You may not get another shot, at least at that particular thing. And I think we need to hold both of those in tension a little bit because there's a truth to be gained in both of those perspectives. So those are bookends, right? Like those are the opposite ends of the spectrum. It's going to come along again, or I have to seize it now. Don't worry about it. Another one's coming, or it's now or never. Yep. And I think we hold, as entrepreneurs, we feel both of those things, right? And so this isn't a right or wrong.
Right.
It's not a black or white. This is an art and science kind of discussion. You have to assess, and you also have to intuit a little bit.
Yep.
You've got to gather data, and you've got to listen to your gut. And I think this is one of the most exciting things about being an entrepreneur is that you get to see and maybe even seize some of the opportunities that come your way.
Yeah. I like what you said earlier. You said the more successful you become, the more opportunities come your way. It's true. It is true. But also, there's the flip of that, right? Flip side of that. You've got shiny object syndrome. And here's the problem. Here's the problem with shiny object syndrome for entrepreneurs is that you get started on a lot of stuff, but you never do finish anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you never get it far enough along that it can reach its full potential.
That's right. And so I see in myself and a lot of other entrepreneurs that we confuse activity with progress. And that really is the crux of being an entrepreneur. It really is the crux. So, and we talk about that, right? We talk about that in other episodes.
Right.
So for those watching and listening, you're probably wondering right about now, how do we know? How do I know if this thing that just crossed my path, if it goes into the opportunity category or the distraction category? Should I pursue it or should I shut it down?
Yeah. I would put those opportunities through, a little bit of a filter, right? By asking a few questions. And so, these are in no particular order, but I think these are good questions for us to ask ourselves when we're assessing an opportunity. And I think some entrepreneurs never slow down long enough to actually ask good questions. And you have to ask good questions to get good answers. And so I think these are good questions that you can ask that maybe help you. They're not going to make a decision for you. I'm not saying if you answer these questions, you'll have an automatic answer, but I think they're a good filter to begin thinking through to assess these kinds of opportunities. Okay. So the first one is this. When I'm faced with a new opportunity, I've got to ask the question, how closely does this align with my current business vision? How closely does this align with my current business vision? Because the closer this opportunity is to my current vision, the easier it's going to be to make it work. In other words, does this opportunity, is this right smack dab in the middle of what I'm already doing? Like this is right down the middle of the road.
Right.
Is it next to it? Right. Like this is the frontage road next to the highway. Like we're running the same direction. Yep. And so this is a complementary sort of thing. Or is this a total left turn? Right. Like I'm going to have to get off the highway and take a detour to pursue this thing. I think those are good questions to ask because, again, the closer it is to your current vision, the easier it's going to be to sort of augment what you're doing and make that new thing work as a part of your overall business strategy.
It's great.
The second question that I think is related to it, but it comes down one level in terms of how we run our businesses is how much resource, whether that's time or money or personnel or energy or whatever it is, how much resource will this opportunity divert from my current strategy? And we've talked about this in another episode that strategy is nothing more than resource allocation, right? Like we all have limited resources and unlimited, potential for where we could put those resources. So our strategy is just how we allocate resources. So how much resource will this new opportunity divert from my current strategy?
Yep.
And is that going to be a problem?
Yeah, I really like that. Think about considering the resources involved, right? Why? Because ideas are just that. They're up in the clouds. It's so easy to come up with new ideas. It's so easy to entertain the idea of executing on an idea. But it could be a distraction. But when you attach a resource to it, time, energy, money, whatever it may be, it becomes tangible.
Right.
And that just makes it a whole lot more difficult for it to distract you.
Right. Well, and when you see that that's going to make it difficult, you can more easily and sort of from an emotionally detached standpoint say, I don't know if that's worth it to me because of what it's going to cost.
Yeah. Don't make the decision on a whim.
Right. Yeah.
Allocate it to look at the resource, allocate it, and consider the cost.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And so then that gets into the next question, which is, will this thing help or hurt my existing strategy?
Nice.
Right. And again, that's a resource question potentially, or at least a focus and attention question. Is this going to help or hurt my existing strategy? Is this going to be a complement to what I'm already doing? Or is this going to be a total conflict with, I'm going to run into all kinds of challenges because there's no way for those things to peacefully coexist. Right. Another question that I think is worth asking, and this is there are two questions, but they sort of work in tandem. The first part of it is this: what happens if this opportunity goes horribly wrong? Worst case scenario thinking. What happens if this thing goes wrong? Is this going to sink everything?
Right.
Is this going to cost me $1,000 or $100,000 or $10 million? Is this going to bankrupt my entire business?
Right.
Is this, what really is at stake if everything goes wrong with this new opportunity that I'm going to pursue? That's worst case scenario thinking. I think in tandem, you have to also ask the question, what if everything goes wonderfully right? Right? What if it's a best case scenario? What if everything that I think this opportunity could be, it really materializes and it really becomes that? And I think you should hold those two things together. The reality is that very rarely do we encounter the worst case or the best case scenario. Usually it's somewhere in between. But I think having thought through the eventualities on both ends of the spectrum, it helps us just balance and know, is this a distraction or is it, potentially part of the pathway to my dream, right?
Yeah.
And one other question that I think is worth asking, this one's a little bit more tricky. What do the people closest to me think of this opportunity?
Okay.
And I realize that can be misleading because sometimes the relationships, the emotions depend, just because somebody's close to you doesn't mean they have business savvy or whatever. So who you ask and how you frame it matters. And we don't have time to get into all of that today. But I think you have to know how the people closest to you feel about it. And that could be in your personal life, right? Like your spouse or partner or, your close relationships, friends, or people who could be impacted by it, as well as potentially people even in your business, if they're key players.
Right.
Not that they necessarily make the decision, but you need to know, are they on board with it?
Right.
Because that's going to also tell you, I want to take this opportunity, but I know that the resistance from within my company is going to be huge. So that compounds the difficulties or whatever that I might face. It doesn't necessarily make the decision for me, but it's just data that I'm able to use to assess how might I potentially move forward and what would it look like to do that.
Yeah. I really like number one on your list. So I wanted to speak to that for a minute. How closely does this align with your current business vision? Keyword being current, right?
Right.
I say that because business vision can undergo revision. You see what I did there? Right.
Yeah, right. 100%. Well, and will and should from time to time.
It should. Yeah. So what about your current one? What about your current vision? Right. I'd say it like this. Your business vision is a filter. For these things coming your way, right?
Yep.
Warren Buffett says it like this. He says, the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything.
Wow.
I've heard another consultant say that Don't choose, because you can choose one today and choose another one tomorrow. But he says to decide, and decide literally means to cut off all other possibilities. So when you're trying to make a decision about what to do with this thing that's coming your way, this opportunity, decide, don't choose.
Yeah. I love that idea. In fact, I heard a podcast just a couple of days ago about this, about how if you're going to decide something, you have to be all in, sort of a burn the ships kind of a mindset. Sure. Otherwise, you never really give it an opportunity to work. If you've always got an exit plan and an exit strategy, you never really give it a chance. Now, there's a limit to that, right? Like we all have to know, especially in business, like where the off ramps are in these things. But to your point of choosing versus deciding, if you're going to go in on an opportunity, to whatever degree you're going to go all in to that point, right? And know what you're getting into, and don't leave the other options on the table. Now, I'd also say this as a word of caution: don't look for opportunities as an escape from doing the hard work of entrepreneurship, right? You hit a ceiling, you beat your head against the wall so many times. And so you look at this new opportunity, which sometimes that's exactly when they magically come along, right? And you say, man, this is an escape hatch, right? Like I can pull the ripcord on this thing and get out, right? Versus figuring out, how do I push through and get to the next level? And again, I would say you've got to assess, is this an opportunity to expand or escape? And that's a really key difference in terms of the opportunities that come to you in business. Is this an opportunity to expand my business or an opportunity to escape from something in my business? And, we've talked about, niche hopping before, right? Like I've been doing business, whatever it might be. I'm running an ad agency for, med spas. And I've kind of hit, plateaued, can't go to the next level. So now I'm going to open an ad agency for chiropractors. Well, all I've really done is niche hopped. All I've done is say, I can start over in this niche and it'll be easier at first because I can take what I've learned here and move it over here. But eventually I'm going to run into problems in that niche too.
That's right.
And so niche hopping is a huge problem for entrepreneurs. And I certainly would encourage you, if you're watching or listening, don't take a niche hopping opportunity just because you think it's going to solve some pain.
That's right. Yeah. Niche hopping is like a clear indicator. It's like boop, 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 caution light. It's a clear indicator that you're trying to avoid the hard work that needs to be done. We all know that you need to go wide before you go deep.
Of course.
In marketing, and that's what a niche is, right? But when you're niche hopping, it's the clear indicator that you're just avoiding the hard work that you need to do to go work. And you're just going to stay a generalist anyway. Joe Polish, he's the host of I Love Marketing podcast. And he's talking about his mentor. And back in the day, he had started a carpet cleaning business. In fact, now he has a carpet cleaning empire. So, but he had started this carpet cleaning business and he plateaued. He was struggling. He's talking to his mentor. He said, man, I've made as much as I can. Like I can't figure out how to make more money. And I think I'm just going to go do this other thing. And his mentor really kind of gave him a kick in the butt and was like, dude, you're being lazy. Like, are other people making more money than you are in carpet cleaning? And he's like, yeah. He's like, have they been in it longer than you? He's like, yeah. He's like, then stay in it. Why would you niche hop? Why would you take your expertise, go to, another industry and have to start all over with learning that industry, right? Just stay in what you're doing. And so again, he was distracted. Yeah. He was distracted, and niche hopping was the evidence of that.
Yeah. Well, and I know this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but we're talking about niche hopping, and this thought just came to me. When you transplant a tree or some kind of a fruit-bearing plant, they say it typically takes at least 1 year to recover from the transplant process before it starts to bear fruit again. Wow. Right? So you could take a perfectly healthy tree that is bearing fruit and you move it to another location, and it's going to take at least a year before it starts bearing fruit again.
Wow.
Right? And I think that's what niche hopping is. Yeah. It's saying, like, I'm doing okay over here. For whatever reason, I'm frustrated, and so I'm just going to go over here. Well, all you're really doing is stunting your own growth and prolonging the fruit-bearing process, so to speak, in your business.
That's
And so, again, I know it's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I think somebody maybe needs to hear that. Like, transplanting yourself is actually not going to help.
That's right.
In the overall, the big picture.
Great analogy.
So I think, coming back to this idea of we're assessing opportunity, and is this a distraction, or is this part of my dream, part of my destiny? I think something we wrestle with, and maybe we don't verbalize it this way, but I think something we wrestle with is the question, is it better to take the risk and be wrong? Or is it better to just stay safe and keep things kind of steady and stable? Right. And I think every entrepreneur wrestles with that question on some level when they face opportunity. And I remember hearing John Maxwell talk about this. He asked the question, what would you do if you knew that you couldn't fail? And, of course, everybody can answer that question pretty easily, right? Like, if I knew I couldn't fail, I would take this step, I would take this risk, I would branch out, I would take this opportunity. That's an easy question to answer. His follow-up question, I think, is more difficult. What would you do if you knew you would fail, but by failing, you would learn and grow along the way, and that would ultimately take you to the next level?
That's good, dude. That's right.
And I think that's a much bigger question to wrestle with, because what that says is I might have to be willing to take a risk even if I fail, because I know the growth that's entailed in the opportunity-taking process is going to make me a better leader, a better business owner, a better entrepreneur. I'm going to be more skilled. I bring more to the table. But that's a hard one, right?
It is.
It's a heavier question,
Right.
I think, to wrestle with.
That is a tough question to wrestle with, but I think it's an important one. So, Matt, as we wrap up here, we want to encourage the audience to write down your business vision, because none of this is really going to work if you don't have a clear vision written down. You won't know how to filter these things, whether it be opportunities or distractions. So write down your business vision. And then second piece of advice I think, Matt, we would give would be having a kill switch. You need to have a kill switch. What do I mean by that? The only thing worse than choosing something as an opportunity and finding out there is a distraction is not knowing when to let it go.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to know when to cut your losses. So go ahead and write down, what is the rule for when I cut my losses? When do I find out whether it's this thing has used up more of my time, energy, or money than I had originally planned?
Right.
Or this thing, I found out this thing is not aligned with my main business vision, my current business vision that you talked about earlier. Either way, you need to have a kill switch.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. We could probably keep talking a lot about this topic, but, to wrap it up for today, hopefully this is something that has challenged you a little bit, maybe in the way that you are seeing and processing and assessing opportunities to know, is this something I should pursue, or is it something that I should just, kind of let roll by? Opportunities are some of the most exciting things about being in business, some of the most exciting things about being an entrepreneur, but also sometimes some of the most overwhelming things. I mean, it's what we live for. But at the same time, like, our businesses can live or die by these opportunities and what we choose to do with them. And so it's absolutely critical that we as leaders understand, how do we assess and how do we act on the opportunities that are in front of us? Leaders see more and before. We see more opportunities than other people see, and often we see them before other people see them. And I think this is such an important part that we just have to understand and embrace. Can we see opportunities more than other people do? Can we see it before they do? Not that we should always jump on them. Not that we should always pursue them, but that we have to develop this discernment to know, what do I do? We've got to have wisdom with our passion. We have to have analysis with our enthusiasm. Leaders can't take every opportunity, but we also can't dismiss every opportunity. We have to know, when does this serve as a distraction, and when does this serve to get me to my destiny? Thanks so much for being part of the Shift podcast community. We are so grateful for the opportunity we have to share, some of our thoughts with you that we hope help encourage you and challenge you and get you to the next level in your life and your leadership. We would love it if you would like and subscribe to the podcast on whatever channel, whatever platform you are watching or listening to it on, as well as would you share it with another business owner, another leader, another entrepreneur who could benefit from it. And of course, if you've got comments or questions, we'd love to hear those as well. Thanks for being with us today, and we'll see you next time.